You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
Meet Mimecast. They're in the business of taking companies at risk of cyber attack and putting them at ease. Picture this. It's Monday morning. You're cruising through hundreds of unread emails. Your impulse to promptly click, download, or respond could be a prompt to launch a cyber attack. An email address is a direct digital path to the mind, the machine, and the data of every person in your organization. It needs better security. I know what you're thinking. I'm all set. I have Microsoft 365 protection, Dave. It might not be enough. That's where Mimecast comes in. They've developed a system that fortifies your email security and reduces costs, risks, and complexities, enabling you and your business to work protected. So before you click your next email, visit Mimecast.com to start your free 30-day trial. Charming Kitten collects against Iranian expatriate dissidents. The Cyber Safety Review Board reports on Lapsus. A call for comment on open-source memory-safe standards. How NSA is coping with the cyber labor market. Yandex is restructuring. Washington Post's Tim Starks joins us with the latest cybersecurity efforts from the DoD. Our guest is Dan L. Dodson, CEO of Fortified Health Security, with insights on protecting patient data and how Viasat was hacked. I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire Intel briefing for Friday, August 11th, 2023. Germany's BFV security service warns that Iran's Charming Kitten threat group is collecting against Iranian dissidents residing in Germany and elsewhere. Both individuals and organizations are targets. Charming Kitten has been paying particular attention to lawyers, journalists, and human rights activists since late 2022 at least. The campaign is a social engineering effort. Deutsche Welle characterizes Charming Kitten's approach as spearphishing. The Iranian service first builds a target dossier containing an inventory of the subject's interests and connections, then cultivates a relationship of trust with the subject, and finally invites the target to a video chat in the course of which credentials are harvested. The BFV recommends the customary cautions with respect to new and unknown online contacts. For those of you playing threat group bingo at home, Charming Kitten is also known as APT-35, Phosphorus, Newscaster, and the Ajax security team. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Cyber Safety Review Board has released the findings of its investigation into the Lapsus group. The report states, the CSRB found that Lapsus and related threat actors use primarily simple techniques like stealing cell phone numbers and phishing employees to gain access to companies and their proprietary data. Among its findings, the board saw a collective failure across organizations to account for the risks associated with using text messaging and voice calls for multi-factor authentication. It calls for organizations to immediately switch to more secure, easy-to-use, passwordless solutions by design. The report adds, to facilitate the transition to passwordless authentication, the board recommends that the federal government develop and promote a secure authentication roadmap for the nation. The roadmap should include standards, frameworks, guidance, tools, and technology that can enable organizations to assess, progress, and implement leading practices for passwordless authentication. The Cyber Safety Review Board is a relatively young organization. It's modeled on the long-established National Transportation Safety Board, best known for its investigation of commercial aviation mishaps. The Lapsus investigation is a good example of what might be expected from what seems destined to become an important organization. The White House Office of the National Cyber Director is seeking input from the public and private sectors for comments on open-source software security and memory-safe programming languages in order to develop and implement long-term and sustainable policy solutions. The ONCD offered a clear statement of why it's seeking input. The office explained why open-source software is important, stating, "In addition to its many benefits, the ubiquity of open-source software in commercial products, government systems, and military platforms presents unique security risks. For this reason, the White House established the Open Source Software Security Initiative, an interagency working group with the goal of identifying policy solutions and channeling government resources to foster greater open-source software security across the ecosystem." It also articulated 3 focus areas that need to be addressed. First, increasing the proliferation of memory-safe programming languages. Second, designing implementation requirements for secure, privacy-preserving security attestations. And third, identifying and promoting focused areas for prioritization. Responses are due by 5 p.m. on October 9th, 2023. Share your insights with the National Cyber Director. The U.S. National Security Agency is looking at ways to implement hybrid work and other incentives as it undergoes a major hiring surge, Federal News Network reports. NSA Director General Paul Nakasone, speaking at the Center for Strategic and International Studies yesterday, said, "We're going to hire probably half of our civilian workforce over the next 5 years, because there was a tremendous demographic change with folks that had been hired in the late 80s that had worked at our agency now becoming retirement eligible." Nakasone said of the agency's Future Ready Workforce Initiative, "It's looking at such things as how do we onboard our personnel better? How do we take a look at well-being? How do we do hybrid work? This idea of perhaps some of what we do doesn't always have to be done in a skiff. And then, how do we take a look at our leadership development?" Yandex is restructuring. The Russian Google has a corporate parent registered in the Netherlands and listed on the NASDAQ, but that's in the process of changing. The Russian side of the business will be spun off from the parent company, Reuters reports. Yandex had been one of the few Russian companies with realistic global ambitions, but the war against Ukraine has changed that, and the reorganization will effectively recognize that. The company's relationship with the Russian regime is complicated. Arkady Volozh, Yandex co-founder and resident in Israel since 2014, holds both Russian and Israeli citizenship. He stepped down from his position as CEO and gave up his seat on the company's board last year after he was subjected to sanctions by the EU over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Yesterday, he sharply criticized the special military operation, stating, "Russia's invasion of Ukraine is barbaric, and I am categorically against it. I am horrified about the fate of people in Ukraine, many of them my personal friends and relatives, whose houses are being bombed every day. Although I moved to Israel in 2014, I have to take my share of responsibility for the country's actions." Why hasn't Russia simply nationalized Yandex? Because, Reuters says, the Kremlin fears the brain drain it expects would follow such a move. The Institute for the Study of War concludes that a crypto-nationalization of the company may be in progress. The objectives are complex: control the domestic information space, reward Putin loyalists by handing assets over to them, and do all this without driving out the tech talent Yandex represents. And finally, Russia's disruption of Viasat in Ukraine during the first days of the special military operation was the only Russian cyber attack that came close to living up to pre-war fears of a digital bolt from the blue. Viasat's vice president and CISO, speaking at Black Hat, gave an account of how that attack was accomplished. Cyberscoop reports that it was a more complex operation than has been generally appreciated. It's widely understood that the attack used wiper malware against modems. There was, however, a second phase designed to prevent restoration of service. According to the report in Cyberscoop, Not only did Russian hackers deploy the wiper malware, they also flooded Viasat servers with requests that quickly overwhelmed their networks. Viasat servers received more than 100,000 requests in a 5-minute time span. That meant that any time a modem would get kicked off the network, it couldn't reconnect because the server could not respond. This aspect of the campaign was discovered only later. The attackers not only wanted the satellite comms down, they wanted them to stay down. Coming up after the break, the Washington Post's Tim Starks joins us with the latest cybersecurity efforts from the DoD. Our guest is Dan L. Dodson, CEO of Fortified Health Security, with insights on protecting patient data. Stay with us. And now, a word from our sponsor, Syntiot. As an 8A Hub Zone minority and women-owned small business company, Syntiot specializes not only in software engineering, but in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity as well. Syntiot's customers, and they retain those customers, include the U.S. Department of Defense, the intelligence community, and the Departments of State and Justice. Their mission is to protect the systems that protect the people who protect us. If you're looking for a partner in accomplishing your mission, check out Syntiot.com. That's Cinteot.com. Your partners in everything data and cybersecurity. And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, session hijacking, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, session cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific exposed data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation that fits seamlessly into existing incident response frameworks. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. Dan Dodson is CEO at Fortified Health Security, a cybersecurity firm focused on protecting the healthcare sector. They recently released their mid-year Horizon report with insights to help healthcare organizations protect patient data and strengthen their security posture. I spoke with Dan Dodson for the details.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that caught my eye relative to the reported breaches, we've been looking at this data since 2017, writing the Horizon report. And over the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in the number of reported breaches that include a business associate. And this year, there was a 273% increase first half of 23 over the first half of 22. And I think what that really means is that organizations need to continue to invest and focus on third-party risk management, which is a hot topic in cybersecurity right now. And this data just proves the importance of making sure that as we're exchanging data to deliver clinical care, that we're focused on making sure that that's a secure way in and outside of the healthcare hospital.
And what sort of specific things do you recommend for organizations to keep on top of their third-party relationships?
Yeah, I think the market has largely adopted kind of the legal elements of it, Dave. A lot of organizations have, business associate agreements between the third parties. We've largely adopted that. I think now it's incumbent upon us to take that a step further and really understand the cybersecurity posture of our partners to make sure that we can exchange data securely. So my recommendation is to put in a thorough third-party management program that includes evaluating and understanding risks on the third party's side, so to speak, and then making sure that you understand what compensating controls, if any, that you need to put in place within your own organization so that you can keep the data within the health systems safe and secure and ultimately continue to deliver care.
When you look at the data that you've gathered in this report, what is the trend that you're tracking here? Are things getting better? Is it getting worse? Or are we staying the same? What does it look like?
Yeah, the data is showing us that the attacks are intensifying and the success of those attacks is increasing. And so although there are areas where we've made progress, there's still a lot of work that has to be done to be able to turn the tides and lower the number of incidences that are reported. But right now it's on the upswing.
You know, a hot topic for a lot of folks these days has been artificial intelligence and tools like ChatGPT. Is that having effect on the healthcare vertical specifically?
Yeah, I think it is, Dave, in a couple of different ways. And we talked about this in the mid-year report. We also have some experts that are weighing in, former FBI, as well as other experts. But I think the resounding theme would be that, generative AI is here to stay. And there's a lot of opportunity for success in a implementation of that type of technology. But we need policies and we need process and we need to really understand the use case and how we're going to be feeding data into these models so that we can make sure that the results of it are not only secure, but also accurate. And so I do think that type of technology is here to stay. We're seeing lots of health systems begin to use this type of technology and experiment on how it can help with identifying, clinical needs within the health system and looking at data. We just need to make sure that we're doing it responsibly.
And one of the things that the report touches on is the legislative process. Where do we stand there in terms of the regulatory regime?
Yeah, the regulation around cybersecurity and healthcare, I don't think has ever had as much momentum as it does now. And this really dates back to last fall when Senator Warner came out with a position around cybersecurity really being a patient safety issue. And so where we stand today is there's a number of bills proposed and working through the legislation. But I think the takeaway is that we are moving towards either very strong guidance around cybersecurity and healthcare or potentially a minimal standard, which will basically require healthcare organizations to have a specific set of cyber capabilities within their environment. We should expect those to work through the legislative process in the second half of 23 into 24. And then the second part, which I think is equally as important, is there's a lot of conversations around coupling that guidance or minimal standard with some type of funding mechanism, right? As an industry, healthcare spends significantly less than other industries on cybersecurity, primarily because the funds within the healthcare environment are competing against clinical priorities as well. And so there's a consensus that there needs to be some level of funding, very similar to what came out with R and high tech around the digitization of EHRs back in kind of the mid 2000s. And I think we're going to see some funding and some regulations coming down the pipe.
Where do we stand with HIPAA? I mean, is there a consensus that it's not up to the task of the modern needs?
I think to some degree, Dave, it does a job thinking about protecting patients and their information. That said, I think now that healthcare is largely digitized, we need to expand HIPAA to make sure that we're either directly or indirectly, most likely with additional legislation, not necessarily a direct expansion of HIPAA, but we need to take it a step further to safeguard care in these communities, right? I mean, we are seeing healthcare organizations be down for multiple weeks and months. And quite frankly, as one of the most powerful nations in the world, we can't afford to not be able to deliver care in our communities because of a cyber event. So I think that there needs to be additional legislation around there to create this type of guidance and standards so that we can reduce the impacts of these attacks.
You bring up a really good point. And as you and I are recording this today, there's a healthcare system, I believe in California, that is down. And that leads to patients being redirected to other facilities, which you can have delay of care. And so We really are talking about potentially putting lives at risk here.
Absolutely. I think, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a lot of focus around making sure that we had the confidentiality and privacy covered. That is certainly important. But I think it goes to the next level when we're disrupting care in these communities. I mean, healthcare exists to protect patients, care for them. And when they can't do that because they're very reliant on technology today to deliver care, these types of successful attacks are just devastating to care in these communities and will no doubt lead to adverse effects on the care continuum for patients in those communities.
Well, based on the information that you all have gathered here, what are your recommendations, for the cybersecurity professionals who are charged with protecting folks in the healthcare systems? What sort of things should they be doing? How should they be setting their priorities here?
Yeah, I think it starts with a robust risk assessment, Dave, to identify where there are opportunities for improvement. From there, I think it's a prioritization around how do we deploy the limited capital we have for cyber to reduce the most amount of risk, right? And so there's this balance between making sure that we are prioritizing not only on basis of risk, but also where we can impact that risk. And so as we walk clients and health systems through that journey, we identify where we can reduce the most amount of risk. And then kind of second and part and parcel to that is lots of these healthcare organizations have cybersecurity tools implemented in their environments, but they are not operationalized. There's no people and process consideration around these technologies. And in order to really get the risk reduction that we're all hoping for and working towards, you really have to consider the operational elements of people and process in addition to technology. And that's where we often see organizations fall short.
That's Dan Dodson from Fortified Health Security. And it is my pleasure to welcome back to the show Tim Starks. He is the author of the Cybersecurity 202 at the Washington Post. Tim, welcome back.
Glad to be back.
So it is Black Hat Week, of course, and I saw in the 202 that you made note of some interesting things that the DoD announced at Black Hat this week. What's going on?
Yeah, the first thing that they've announced, and it's the biggest thing that they're involved in. There's also a secondary thing that they're involved in. So big week for DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which of course is the fascinating high tech shop of the DoD, and credited with partially making the internet become a thing.
Right.
Among other strange, sometimes diabolical inventions. In this case, what they've done is they're hosting a competition that they're calling the Artificial Intelligence Cyber Challenge.
Okay.
And the idea is that they're going to have a competition and invite folk to use AI to counter cyber attacks. Of course, we know that AI has been feared as a thing that will help cyber attacks. This is what they're trying to do here is they're trying to get people to harness its power for good. And they'll be having some prize money. They'll be having competitions going to last over a couple years before it finally ends up with one big winner. And those companies, some of which will be small businesses, will be teaming up with all the big names in AI, like OpenAI and Microsoft, Google. So it's kind of an interesting competition. It's a little similar to something they did a few years back, but it's much more explicitly focused on AI and less on just generalized machine hacking. And has more of a prize money and has more of a focus in terms of working with the companies that are already doing AI.
Yeah. Earlier this week, I was talking with Rob Boyce from Accenture, who's at Black Hat, and he was saying how impressed he was with the degree to which the government has a presence there this year, more than he'd ever seen before. I mean, I guess this program speaks to that.
It does, and I feel like it's also kind of an upward swing since I've been covering cybersecurity and heading out to Black Hat DEF CON week. Not there this week, but in past years, it felt like there's just this steady upward arc of the government being at those events. And I think what the Accenture fellow said was true. And it's not, the interesting thing is that's not even the only announcement this week at Black Hat from the government. They're also doing something on open source and memory safe programming language. So and that's actually a much bigger, in terms of the amount of agencies involved. That's a bigger project where CISA is involved, where DARPA is again involved, where the Office of Management and Budget. It's a wider project, if not a bigger one.
What are some of the details about that project?
Yeah, so this is a request for information, which I always struggle to describe to readers, but it's essentially a public call for, hey, we're looking into this. Give us your insights. And it's two topics: open source security, which of course has been an issue with Log4j and some of the other big issues we've seen from time to time on the vulnerabilities there. They're also looking at memory safe programming languages, which is I think last I'd done a check, some people thought that 65% of the bugs that we deal with these days are related to these languages that are a little antiquated and aren't as safe to use. So this is a thing that they're going to be asking for people to talk to them about in the public sector, private sector, up through October 9th, I believe is the exact date.
Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit with you here, we are, I guess, close enough now that we can say we're heading into the back to school part of the calendar.
Yeah.
As a father of a son who's heading back to high school, I just got the word that it's time to buy school supplies. And the White House had an event covering this with relation to cyber attacks. And actually, the First Lady attended.
Yeah, there were a lot of people there at the White House for that event. The idea is they're trying to put focus on it. They're trying to get commitments from everyone to devote money or projects to this. Back to school is the one of the worst times for cyber attacks. In fact, the idea of the hackers is to catch them off guard, and to if you're looking at a time when things are disorganized. People aren't new people are coming into jobs. Back to school is a big time for that. So a timely event for the White House to do that.
Yeah. In reading your coverage, and I believe it was your colleague, David DiMolfetta, who wrote the article about it, I was surprised, I guess, in that I'd never really thought about it, that school systems don't really have any reporting requirements, and that many of them choose to not report when they have a cyber incident.
Yeah, that's something that could change not very soon. There's the law that Congress passed last year to require reporting for critical infrastructure, and because in a roundabout sort of way, schools are part of the government sector of critical infrastructure, they might be subject to this. But that's a regulation that's a little ways off in terms of when it will actually be finished. It's a regulation that has not been decided exactly what the parameters will be. Some of that was left up to CISA to decide. So they might be subject to that in a couple of years, but right now they aren't, and there's no requirement. And a lot of anybody who's a hacking victim in some cases doesn't want to report it. Maybe it would be better if they did, but there's an embarrassment factor, there's a risk factor in terms of legal that maybe they're worrying about. So maybe it's not right, but it is a fact of life sometimes that people who are victims don't report.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tim Starks is the author of the Cybersecurity 202 at the Washington Post. Tim, thanks so much for taking the time for us today.
Thank you so much.
Tired of cybersecurity mega conferences? MWise is different. With a focused agenda and targeted problem solving, MWise is where security's best go to get better. From September 18th through the 20th in Washington, D.C., you'll join a special community of security's sharpest minds, hear perspectives you might not get anywhere else, and reach a new level of mastery that'll prepare you for what's next. Register early and save at mwise.mandiant.com/conf23. That's mwise.mandiant.com/CONF23. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. Be sure to check out this weekend's Research Saturday and my conversation with Alex Delamotte from Sentinel Labs. We're discussing their work, Cloudy with a Chance of Credentials. AWS targeting cred stealer expands to Azure and GCP. That's Research Saturday. Check it out. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. You can email us at cyberwire@n2k.com. Your feedback helps us ensure we're delivering the information and insights that help keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like the CyberWire are part of the daily intelligence routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, as well as the critical security teams supporting the Fortune 500 and many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K Strategic Workforce Intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. Learn more at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Trey Hester with original music by Elliot Peltzman. The show was written by our editorial staff. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week. MISSY is a nonprofit organization formed exclusively to further and promote charitable, educational, and scientific purposes, including furthering innovation in cybersecurity through education, global technology partnerships, investment, and community engagement to create a collaborative network of subject matter experts and cyber professionals. Their mission accelerator facilities and programs thrive on finding fresh ideas, technologies, and the people with the passion needed to repurpose current and emerging cyber technologies into capabilities at maximum speed. For information on how you can get involved, please visit missy.tech. And we thank MISSY, the Maryland Innovation and Security Institute, for sponsoring our show. One final note, if you missed our recent panel discussion with my friends at AWS, Splunk, and Dragos on securing digital transition, you can catch the conversation on demand by visiting thecyberwire.com/Dragos.